Okay, this is the first in a short series of tutorials which will take us from using the basic shape tools to creating an animation of a looping chain on two cogs, and that will be using a variety of motion tween techniques. In this first tutorial we will be using the shape tool, Polystar, adding a gradient fill, using the free transform tools, using the align panel, and eventually using a very basic motion tween. Okay. So we'll take the default setting, ActionScript free, create new file, and I have got my document properties set to default as 1600 by 600. You may wish to change your preferences here, as the default for Flash is normally 550 by 400. The frame rate is 24 frames per second. That's fine, and I'm going to leave the stage color as white for now. I may change it later. Okay, in version CS6 and below you would find the Polystar tool underneath the rectangle by default, along with the circle tool, or the oval tool as it's known. But in CC, each of these have got their own icons, so I'll choose the Polystar tool, and then in the properties window I will have tool settings, and here I can define whether I wish to create a star or polygon, and also the number of sides. I think for this I'm going to create a 30-sided shape. I'm going to create a star, and it's going to have a point size of 1. Okay, let's just see what that draws. I'll set my fill to be a grey colour, and my outline to be black. Okay, now if I hold shift when I click and drag, this will constrain the proportions, otherwise it might not create the shape that we want. Okay. And we'll see there currently, because my outline is set at 58.4, we get a rather strange outline. I'm going to take that right down to about 2 pixels, which you can type in if you want. The stroke size 2 pixels, and there we are. We've got something that looks a bit like a cog. We could amend this so that it looks a bit more like a cog if we wanted to, perhaps by using the subselect tool at a later point, selecting all of the inner points like so, and then perhaps moving them together like that to create a bit more of a flat effect on the way around. But for now I'm just going to stick with this. So using the selection tool, I can then highlight that shape, right click and choose convert to symbol, and at this point it's just going to be a graphic symbol. I'm not going to do anything particularly complicated with it, and I will just call that cog inner. And I've got the registration point set to center. I like to keep it that way because at some point later on we will be rotating this, and I'd like to rotate around that point. So okay, when I've created that, what will appear in the library is a graphic symbol, and the properties are there, sizes. By double clicking on the symbol it's now created, and it's got a blue bounding box which illustrates that it is now a symbol, I can go into that timeline and perhaps change the fill. I can change it from a solid colour, or keep it a solid colour, which here changes to red there, and I can change it to a radial gradient, which is currently set up to a bit of a sunburst effect. I'll set that colour there, give it a slight grey tint, another grey tint, and another one here. Okay, I'll just swap them around a little bit, and you see how moving the swatch changes the effect. And the difference there might be a little bit too great. Okay. Now I'm going to return to the main timeline, so I'll hover over the word scene 1 and then click on that, and so we return to the main timeline. Now I'm just going to duplicate this, so with the selection tool still, if I alt click the object and then drag, you'll see a duplicate appear. I'll let go and drop it there. Then using the transform tool, I can resize. So I'll resize that to be slightly smaller, and then using the align panel, I can select both together, and I can align the horizontal centers to the overlap and the vertical centers. Currently that's set to align to stage as well. I'm going to keep that for now, but you don't have to have it selected, and it will be relative to the symbols themselves. And then we'll just copy this again. So selection tool, alt click, there we go, and maybe one more time. And then using the transform tool, I'll just make that a bit smaller. I'll go over to get a rough idea. Maybe a little bit smaller than that. And then again with this one. I can select all of them together and then align centers both ways. And I'm going to turn that into the movie clip symbol of its own. Convert to symbol. Change that to movie clip, and call that cogs 1, just in case I create another series of cogs. The registration point set to center again, okay, and there we go. Now I've got a movie clip, which if I use the selection tool, you'll see it's got a blue bounding box. So all I'm going to do now is just show you a basic rotation animation. So I'll call layer 1 cogs, and I will give it a 1 second timeline by going to frame 24, inserting keyframe, frame, then selecting create motion tween, and by selecting anywhere inside of that motion tween, you'll notice in properties that the motion tween has its own properties. We can choose the easing in or out. We can also change the rotation, so I'm going to change the rotation to 1, and we can change the direction. So currently it's set to clockwise, and if I press return on the start point, you'll see it rotates. And if we press Ctrl and enter to test the movie, you'll see it looping. And that is the end of part 1.